it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, everyone. So that's it, all done. This is the way the world ends, as T.S. Eliot once wrote, not with a bang, but a whimper. Well, at least for me, as an abysmal final day sees karmic restorative justice after last year's stolen top 100k, as I find myself licking several wounds at once. FPL-wise, hangover-wise, I'm just about over it, but I had to open up a beer I've been saving for this last pod, just because, it's the last pod of this campaign, and also recovering from a bit of an illness unrelated to the hangover, but probably not made better by going out and having loads of beers. So apologies if I am coughing a lot during this pod. I will try to mute as much as I possibly can. I do sound gravelly. Hopefully gives me some gravitas for the rest of this. Anyway, fresh from more successful, and as always, fun meets, more successful than mine was anyway on both fronts. I'm joined by Sam as always. How are you, mate? How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks. I'm in a good mood after what was a really good, fun FPL meets to finish up the season, and we're going to give a shout out in a moment's time, but a special one. And I honestly cannot believe this happened. But as I walked into the pub, my brother, of all people, was stood in front of me at the bar, had no idea about FPL meets or what was going on, just happened to be in London and happened to be trying to find a pub to watch the Charlton Leyton Orient game. And after about 10 minutes of just like giddy disbelief, he stuck around for the entire thing as well and had a great time. So yeah, just goes to show you don't even have to be like mad into FPL to come along to one of those and have a great time. And that was one of the highlights of my season as well. I had a great time with my brother. But as always, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pods, we'll go through where we ended up on the final day. Quickly note what is quite a ridiculous outcome on this pod in particular, and go back through the 10 mistakes that we said we wouldn't make this year and document how we actually did versus those mistakes, whether we made them, whether we were actually pretty good on them this season, and of course where we might be able to take learnings for next season. Of course, feel free to laugh along the way with us, and at us is also fine. We're going to do a bold claims roundup, week to week and season long ones. Of course, at the start of the year, we made some bold claims that were relevant only by the end of the season. And finally, some awards we'd like to give out to players, teams, that sort of thing, as we discuss and round off the 24-25 season. It's Tuesday, the 27th of May, but the date hardly matters. It all went down on Sunday. It's all over now. And of course, a proper shout out now to FPL Meets. I think Tom wants to take it away on that one.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really, really good event. I'm really sorry I had to run off. I had my toddler started getting sick, so I had to make a very hasty escape. I promise I wasn't too wasted or anything like that. I was really, really, well, obviously I wasn't annoyed. I was annoyed at the circumstances rather than annoyed at my child. But I had to kind of cut and run pretty quickly because once you get that sort of summons, you're like, right, okay, need to go. Yeah, thanks so much for everyone who came. Really good to meet lots of new people who had kind of specifically made the journey just because they were part of it. One fella had, I forget, I think it was Nathan, that was there because he was visiting family down from Leeds and just happened to pop in to see the football on the final day. And lots of new faces, lots of kind of returning faces as well. I think in the end we got to about 30-40 people, so a bit quieter than normal. The trains were a bit messed up. Maybe also the fact that we were hosting it put some people off, Sam, who knows. But yeah, no, a really great time was had by all, and I remember to eat, most importantly. Thanks so much, James FPL, for forcing me to eat a really terrible chicken burger and some sweet potato fries that had been burnt to a crisp. It was a very dodgy meal, but definitely kept me going a lot longer. So yeah, I had a great day, and yeah, it's just a shame I had to leave a bit earlier.
I had a fantastic pizza at the end of the night watching the end of match of the day, though, so I'm very happy with the outcome. It was great fun, though, wasn't it, Tom? What a day. And it was always one that you mark at the start of the season, like, okay, game week 38, that's Sunday, make sure you're there for that. And yeah, definitely back again next year. But it was great fun hosting. I'm not sure whether we did a good job of hosting. It just sort of happened organically, didn't it? I think 40-50 people ended up coming. There are some latecomers, some of the big streamers, Harry, Oscar, Dan as well, all came later on. after their live streams were over, and it was great to see all of them. Yeah, really good time had, and some incredible ranks going around the group as well from people who I hadn't really even noticed or heard had been having good seasons. So yeah, really well done to all of you. Hopefully you enjoyed the event, and yeah, here's to next year.
Yeah, shame about the football though, huh?
Yeah,
Unless you,
shame about it.
yeah, well, I mean, I think in
do it.
some years there are lots of really good stuff that goes on. For you though, there were a couple of really good things that went on, principally because of the last move you made, and it was a poetic sort of way to bookend the season, wasn't it? In terms of the key man you brought in, who smashed you into a really, really good final day.
Yeah, I mean, there was basically only 1 or 2 players in game week 38 who did anything of note, and I got really lucky. I've had really bad luck all season, I would say, or I'd argue. Some bad decisions made along the way, of course, as well. But one man who has consistently been a thorn in my side, despite owning him, has been Semenyo. And I decided that it was time to rid myself from a troll ahead of next year. And it all just felt like the right time. The minutes were good. Obviously, the fixture was great, and I could get to him fairly easily. I wasn't too confident in Cliver either, given a couple of early subs recently. And I just got a bit of really good luck go my way, which was incredible. 16 points from him, top point scorer of the game week, and had him alongside Bowen, who also helped me out a bit, and Burmo, Salah, Cap. And it was basically just my midfield that did the job. On top of that, Gvardiol got a couple of bonus points, I think, in his clean sheet, and rounded me off the season with 76 points, which was, I think, a 16 or 17 point green arrow, and got me to 208k, which, look, at the start of the season, I wouldn't have been happy with it. But considering where I was 4 or 5 game weeks ago coming out of the free hit, I would have been very happy with it. So it was a good final few weeks. I played it relatively sensibly with a little bit of spice at the end. And yeah, I've rid myself of 1 troll going into next year. So very happy. It was a great day. And also, coincidentally, my brother, having not listened to me all week, also bought Semenyo, and we got to celebrate the points together. So that was nice as well. But yeah, it was a good day for me.
No, lovely stuff. Wasn't so good for me. I did bring in and captain Saka in the end. I was still fairly bullish on the minutes, and I was listening to James Planet FPL's final pods, and I think that kind of I agree with him completely. Obviously, I would say this, but agree with him completely that if you saw the Southampton team, you'd be like, yeah, doubling down on captain Saka, because I just had a really good feeling that he would play, but he didn't. And yeah, I think he did have a goal ruled out, didn't he? But yeah, it obviously, yeah, it was a bit rubbish, because I had him, Bumo, or Bowen. I think last pod, kind of my boss team was captain Bowen, and went with Saka as lowest point scorer in midfield. And yeah, I mean, I do all the same players as you, effectively. Other than that, ended up in 52, and guess what? I ended up 208k. So, yeah,
absolutely bonkers.
Strangely, actually, Sam and I basically ended up on the same score this year, which has never happened before on Who Got the Assist, mainly because I've mostly been trounced by my co-hosts. But yeah, 2-4-7-2 we both got this year. I mean, I've kind of come down here, whereas Sam has kind of fought his way back up here. But I mean, we both couldn't believe it, could we? When I saw it, I showed it to you. Oh my goodness, what are the chances? Like, okay, we have been kind of, obviously, through doing this and talking to each other about FPL, both on and offline, there's going to be some elements of synergy, but I don't think we've been that close, especially because I changed my chip strategy, which we'll talk about later. And we've made different decisions throughout the year. So it's absolutely wild that we somehow both ended up in the same spot. I think you've shaded it in terms of the actual overall rank by transfers made or hits taken or something like that. But my God, yeah, when we saw that, we were like, whoa, no way.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken very different paths to get here. I mean, anyone tuning into this pod for the first time would see this and assume that groupthink has happened to the extreme here. We've ended up on the same team all the way through, and we've finished on the same points. But we've both come at it very different ways from very different angles. And like you said, different chip strategy each. We've had very different differentials throughout the season as well, and I mean, you used your triple captain at a completely different time in the season to me. We ended up the season with a fair few different picks as well, and yet we've ended up on the exact same score, which is absolutely incredible. I think, was it Fran as well, you mentioned, is on the same exact score as us on 2-4-7-2 too. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Tom.
He probably won't want to be mentioned in this
No,
amongst such
one of
broken
us. One of us.
company. Poor guy, but yeah, there were loads of managers much better than me who ended up around or even below, including the winner of last year's FPL, who finished a point below us. So I mean, that's a fair
Interesting.
if nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We'll take that.
I'm not gonna. There are some seasons that I look back on and think, oh, that was great. You know, I really kind of I'm going to miss that season. The one with Lucy was it was a good ending, but that was a season that was oddly a bit like this, where I'm kind of like, oh god. But last season, I definitely kind of just having that kind of end day, that final day. I was oh, I wish that could kept going. You know, I was buzzing about FPL for a good few days after that. But for this, I mean, after this, I'm going to log out of FPL and not log it back into it until the relaunch sort of time frame. But yeah, I mean, it was a difficult season, and there's definitely something we'll kind of talk about. But we're going to try not to kind of go too far into our own sort of into our own abysses here, because I mean, it's fair to say, Sam, this is definitely not kind of where we want to be, and we're both going to try very hard indeed, as far as we possibly can, in the game of luck, to improve things next year.
Yeah, for sure. And mistakes were made, weren't they, along the way, as we'll come into. But it's one quick one before moving on from this section. All I'd say is it's really interesting how we've ended up on the same rank, and yet it feels like we've both got very different perspectives of FPL going into the break, just because of that final game week. And the fact that I've had quite a nice end point means that I'm actually really looking forward to FPL already, and I think it feels like it's maybe the other way for you. So I'm going to try my very best to like send the odd message to you over the break and just like convince you it's still a worthwhile cause and you're going to have fun next year.
Oh no, I'll be there no matter what. It's peak it's peak rules, Sam. That's what it is. Peak rules. You remember two things about something that you've done. You remember the peak of it and the end of it. Unfortunately, my peak was game week 2 in terms of overall rank, and the end has been appalling. So it's just one of those where I'm just going to take it on my chin and move on effectively. Hey, there we go. In terms of those mistakes, I think the main kind of source of this pod was really to just look back at the start of the year. If you've been listening to us for that long or watching us for that long, we went through 10 kind of key errors that we said that we were not going to make this year, and we thought it might be good to go through those 10. To think about our season and also think about sort of your seasons as well, and help you kind of have some idea when you were kind of just closing the book on this campaign. What happened with you? Did you make any of these mistakes? Are these mistakes you avoided, as Sam mentioned earlier on? And are these things that you might want to be swerving next year or thinking about next year? Hopefully some of our examples resonate with you, and we'll definitely kind of maybe return to this next year actually as well, because we need to probably remind ourselves in pre-season not to make these silly errors. There are 10, and I think instead of reading them all through now, because I think that'd be a bit boring, let's just go through them one by one. And the very first one, which was my one, because it has been, if you've been listening to me for an awfully long time, you will know this. It's been one of those, my main Achilles heel. I will not try to be too clever. And I think certainly from making the painful look through my season, I think I've again fallen prey to this. And I think there's, if I could pinpoint two things, Sam, there's two reasons why I think the season has been really crap. One is game week 6 wildcard, which utterly failed. We'll speak about that because I was a shared experience. And two was playing the chips in basically the wrong order. They both kind of they're both attributable to this. Got a wider comment about the state of FPL this year, which I'll leave till later. But those are the two things that kind of come to mind from looking at the past. But try not to be too clever. I think crystallizes really well in one team and one player in particular, Nottingham Forest, Chris Wood. I didn't own Chris Wood pretty much all season, apart from three game weeks. Didn't bank a single goal from him. I didn't bank a single Nottingham Forest clean sheet. Probably looking about 80 to 90 effective points there. And I know that kind of on one hand there is obviously the review side of it, and the kind of analytics kind of data-led way we do look at things, which maybe would have said that, hey, you know, it's probably not worth getting Wood, or it's not worth getting Forest in. Stop laughing. But at the same time, I wonder whether there is an element of trying to be too clever there, with not doing that. There are a lot. But I look at kind of Cert Alps, FPL Optimize, and also kind of the live FPL season in terms of the players who hurt you the most. There has to be some element of that when you've maybe there should have been a time when I just stopped being clever and just in terms of kind of taking him on with all sorts of players and just went for covering my backside effectively. And I feel like not doing that was probably a bit of a downfall in terms of trying to be too clever when I didn't need to be.
Yeah, I think you'd be forgiven for not having Wood down as being too clever to begin with. I think the first 4 or 5 game weeks there was enough to suggest that, okay, this is just a little hot patch and he'll probably regress to the mean. But by the time we hit wildcard in game week 6, it'd been going on long enough and Forest had looked fairly convincing, alongside the fact that there was a spot in our wildcard sides that could have been filled with Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest defence probably as well at the same time. And I think we both chose to avoid that on a wild card. So yeah, I think at that point, being too clever probably comes into it. I think for me, being too clever was probably the thing that derailed the start to my season. I actually got off to an okay start rank wise. The first 2 game weeks weren't too terrible, but looking back at my team, I'm absolutely humiliated, I think, with what some of the choices that I picked. So bringing in Minte, who is admittedly has proven to be a decent player, but unproven in the league. Barco, who we didn't even know would stay. And then alongside, you've got other slight risks like Smith Rowe. And then I also had Armstrong, which is probably the funniest of the lot. It did feel like I was trying to overthink things a little bit, and maybe just a little bit more security at the start of the season. Don't take too many gambles, try to be over clever, try to overthink it and be too clever. And then like start baking in those risks and start working on the data of the season after a few game weeks would be a more wise call for me. So not the only way, not the only time I've been too clever either. Saka triple captain, arguably too clever. Asensio over Rodgers ahead of the bench boost week was again arguably overthinking it massively. Just go with the reliable pick rather than trying to almost go too aggressive, which will come on to one of our points later on. Yeah, it's several times this season where I've definitely been too clever, and that's probably the rule or the mistake out of all of the 10 that I'm most guilty of, or definitely one of.
Some of it, and I think lots of people were thinking it is going to be invariably outcome based, because Asensio, if he'd have scored one or both of those pens on bench boost 32, we've both been laughing. I mean, whatever.
I still think it would have been a mistake.
Yeah, maybe just because of the minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, 33 for me playing the free hit there. That was probably a good example of trying not to be clever, of trying to be too clever. Like, even though there was reasoning behind it, the outcome is pretty painful. Like, if I'd have played 33 and 34 in the template way, which I was just planning to, I'd almost definitely been in with a good shout of top 100k. Like 34, looking back, was one of my most ruinous weeks, because I didn't have Cunha, on a week where pretty much everyone around me did, and that was pretty painful. And there's other things like triple captain Haaland in a single game week, but that was the highest kind of individual XG he's ever got in a game, so I can't really be too annoyed about that. And the assistant manager was good, but I guess maybe it's kind of trying to be too clever in some ways, but as you kind of touched on, if you mix it in with results not going your way as well, as we all know can always be a thing, it becomes kind of a real hero or zero thing. And that was ultimately a 0 this year, as the house won comfortably on all of the big gambles I kind of made. Like, mentioned the game, which is wild card. It's just little things that stick in my mind, Sam. Like removing Milenkovic for Lewis at the last minute, such a Nottingham Forest point. Like, I should have stuck to my guns now, and I had him in kind of the whole time thinking, yeah, okay, next few fixtures he'll be great. Just love and leave in the team. But I dread to think how many points I lost out on there. I did get a small green arrow after that in game week 7, but the team I was left with after that wild card, when probably we should have picked up Chris Wood, and precipitated my fall to 1 million OR in game week 14. And from that, I never really recovered, even though I had a lot of the season left to do so. This is a big one for me. Maybe to a slightly lesser extent for you. I think there's a couple of others that I think you'll probably kind of zero in on more. But for me, this is again a bit of a learning. I've got some points to make at the very end about the state of this season, about why this may not have been as bad as it may look. But Yeah, it's a big example to everyone to maybe not try to be too clever sometimes in what is it is at root a very simple game, despite the 5 free transfers now coming in to change things a tiny bit. Next one was one of your ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, so number 2 is I will not act on limited news. So this was more to do with making moves early, but also making moves based on a lack of certainty. So last season we got burned a few times. I think that Darwin Watkins blend that happened halfway through the season is a prime example of that. This season, I think we've been kind of okay on it. Like, I don't really remember a specific time where there was a limited set of some sort of upcoming injury news that maybe we were like gambling on, or maybe I moved too early. In fact, at some points, maybe I moved too late and I missed out on a little bit of team value. Although, I don't think that's been massively punishing to me this season. I've seen a lot of people with much better ranks than me and worse team value. So I don't think it's been massively punishing waiting. So I think as far as it goes for me, it's not been a bad one. I think this one's been one that I really did focus on this season to make sure that I didn't. Oh, the other main one from last year was that the bench boost week where I got the Richarlison injury after the press conferences, and I'd already made the moves. So I think I ended up taking a -12 or a -16 just to make sure I had a playing 15. I really didn't want that to happen this year. And luckily, the most I ever took this year was a -4. And I think that was because of guaranteed injuries, the time that I first took a hit. And then obviously you take a few around chip season as well. So yeah, I think generally okay this year. And it's one that I need to make sure that I keep at the front and center of my mind for next year.
Yeah, I do think 1 and 2 are quite similar in terms of them kind of being unforced errors and trying to kind of mitigate against those. And the best players don't make them, or don't admit to making them anyway. And I think last year, things like, I don't know, selling Ollie Watkins, things like that kind of stick in your mind. This year, I can't think of a single moment where that has happened. I had a pretty decent team value, so I did make some moves kind of early, and I think I kind of just got them over a little bit more this year than did last year, perhaps. But certainly, I feel like we were both quite good in terms of ensuring that we had kind of news to a confidence level that we were comfortable with before making transfers. I don't think that there was anything here which stuck out. So hey, 1 cross, 1 tick, I think. Which is quite good. Let's just cross that one through. We're happy with that forever. We're never going to act on limited news ever again. We say next year taking -8 on game week 3 after a calamitous purchase of Cunha of Man United just before he's ruled out for poking Amram in the eye or something. Anyway, number 3 is another one of mine. I will not start watching football regularly. Well, unfortunately, I kind of did to some extent, just because I'd started a new job and I was really busy with my family and things. And it is quite difficult sometimes actually to fit in as much football as I'd like. And I must watch match of the day and things like that. But watching live games has just become a bit of a pain in the backside in terms of scheduling, just because it's, my daughter's around the weekend. It's quite hard to do. That said, I don't think I kind of made any real moves which were kind of silly or out of kilter with what was going on. The only thing I can possibly think of, Sam, is bringing in Foden on my game week 30 wildcards, who had been kind of out of sorts. I did kind of see and read a lot about that. But injuries and things like that did make me think, okay, they had Leicester, I think, and then a flailing United 30-31, a double game week in 33. I could afford him. That made it kind of worthwhile. Bought him, and obviously it was a complete flop, and ended up having to sell him kind of 2 weeks in the future to set up for the 32 bench boost. So maybe that's an example of what was going on. By extension, that meant I had to get Sarr over Eze, but to be honest, Eze at that time hadn't started to kind of play in full sunshine mode, as it were, and Sarr has outstassed him for this season in terms of underlying data. I think he ended up 6th overall, Sarr, for non-pen XGI, which is pretty damn ridiculous. So I'm not going to kind of castigate myself too much for that one, but yeah, one of those which I really wish I could watch more football. I think I've just this year accepted that, unfortunately, as my daughter's gotten older, not a baby anymore, needs more of my attention. I simply I'm going to have to try to figure out ways that I can manage this, be it, watch match a day on the commute, which I've done a couple of times, and to make sure I'm not saying something stupid on the pod on the Tuesday night. or trying to find time somehow to fit a live game in through extensive negotiations from my other half. You've watched quite a lot this year, haven't you? In contrast.
Yeah, it's gotten better. Also, job related. I think the first half of the season, I always try to get off to a really good start, watch as much as possible, mainly just because I've missed football. So I try to watch as many games as physically doable. But yeah, my work was getting pretty brutal in the sort of winter period. So I kind of dropped off probably from around game week 8, 9 through to Christmas. I didn't get as much in as I'd like to. And then a new job in the new year. So I've been much better in the last couple of months since that new job. I've gone freelance, so I've got a bit more of a flexible schedule, and I'm not working weekends as much as I might have used to. So I'm doing a little bit better. I'd probably give myself a B- on this one if we were grading it. And next season, I'm in hopefully a stronger point to actually watch even more football and obsess over it to an even greater extent. So whether or not I push it too far and become too eye test driven, that's something I need to be guarding against if I'm watching it all the time. And also you can just get a little bit of fatigue on it if you're watching all of the games. Not all games are blockbuster matches that you're enjoying. Some of them are pretty much stalemates. So there's kind of a balance to strike here where there's maybe a sort of a maximum amount you can take in before the information just sort of goes over your head. So yeah, I think maybe B- if I was grading it on this one, and hopefully maybe a little bit better next year, but I don't think much needs to be done.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, cool. Next one. I will not lose track of my own instinct. One of yours, I think, more than me. I think if I'm going to grade myself here, I think it's probably a B. I am, if nothing else, quite a decisive person, and I think I was quite good until the very end. The very end was kind of the time when we were talking about captaincy and things. I could feel myself starting to just sort of bluster a little bit, just so I wasn't really particularly sure what I was doing, and transfers I wasn't sure what I was doing. But in the main course of the season, I kind of knew what I kind of wanted to do. It was just when it was getting towards the end, the desperation was setting in, and the game was very much about those short-term sort of attempts to spike variance. Things did become a lot more a lot less focused, shall we say. So things like, I don't know, buying Evan Nilsson one week and selling him the next, that sort of those sorts of behaviors perhaps were things that maybe just kind of conducive to the fact that I'd had kind of quite a bruising end to the year, not really going anywhere, kind of stuck hovering around the sort of 180, 220k mark and not being able to go anywhere, which was kind of making me lose faith in basically what my sort of gut feel was on things. Like Simon March, who came on this pod many years ago, said that your gut is not an FPL manager, your brain is. But I mean, whatever you want to refer to it as, your gut, it's drawing on your experience, really. And I think there was a certain point where, as things got more desperate, it kind of became harder and harder to see the wood through the trees, basically, for me. This is one of yours, though. I mean, why did you put this in, and do you think you've improved it?
Yeah, so a really good question in the chat from Paul here, which relates to why I put it in the first place, which is, do you think that being a content creator changes the way you play at all? And that is exactly why I put this in as a mistake to avoid going into my second season on this pod and as a content creator at the start of the year. Because I think at times last year, I did get dragged along with the narrative maybe a little bit too much. I was watching so much content and trying to make sure that I was really in the weeds of every little thing that could have changed. All the minutiae was going around my head. And I got decision fatigue, and I just went too far with it. I lost track of what my own instinct was. With this year, I think I've done a lot better. And if anything, that's been, again, to my own detriment. Maybe I've just swung too much the other way at times. I don't think it's been a consistent problem, but I think in very specific, isolated game weeks, especially when I started needing to chase. And I think you summed it up well a minute ago as well, Tom, where the later on in the season you got, the more it was like, well, I've got to take a swing, because if I go along with what the crowd is doing, and what the data is suggesting, what the X-Mins are suggesting, then I'm not really going to regain the big chunks of rank that you need to end up on a rank that you'd be happy with. So there are a few times towards the second half of the season, Mateta captain against Southampton, Saka triple captain, Asensio in, a few other mentions probably go around that sort of time that I've forgotten now, where I backed my own instinct thinking, you know what, I can gain an edge here because I am going to overestimate Saka's minutes and I think everyone else is underestimating them. And I'm hoping that I get lucky there.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, but there's definitely a few where I backed my own instinct because I didn't want to become just like that sort of content creator that's just barking the same stuff that everyone else is. I needed to feel like an individual, and maybe sometimes I was ignoring information as it was being presented to me. So maybe I went too far on this one. But I certainly backed my own instinct at times. It just didn't work out the way I wanted it to. So if the result was better, maybe I'd be giving myself an A-star on this one. But as it goes, Asensio blanked, Saka blanked, Mateta blanked, all of these players blanked. So maybe I went too far.
Yes, we're all individuals, and Mr. T's just basically summed up my point in the chat. To be fair, you have to be brave sometimes. It doesn't always play out, and that's completely true. If you do get one of these genius, one of these calls that come off, which are really kind of out there. I mean, if Saka has put away one of those chances on triple captain, of the 4 or 5 he had, or the 2 or 3 big chances he created went in, you're sitting here thinking you're a genius. I mean,
Yeah,
they are very thin margins in FPL. Those sort of sliding door moments come all the time. So yeah, I think we can give ourselves a solid B on that one, really, actually, as well. I'm not really particularly too, I don't feel like we were beholden too much to what was going on there. Number 5, I will not dismiss review as quickly. So I don't think that we're ever going to kind of convert fully to becoming a review / Solio or whatever pod. Although I see JT's in the chat. Obviously, I know that Solio will change the world and dominate us, and I sort of humbly submit myself to our new overlords. But I think that this is one I put in just because there were a lot of times I've said to Simon Analytic when he was on the pod that first 10 weeks I always think that it's a little bit, a review can be a little bit drunk, but then after that, there's always a time when it kicks in and becomes very, very good. But I have one note I would make is that analytics managers do seem to have had a bit of a tough year across the board. The Elite 1000s, their average rank is kind of around 76k according to the season review on FPL Review, which is obviously good, but that's nowhere as good as the norm. Normally, kind of that comes out about kind of, I think the number that sticks into my head was 22k, something like that is kind of what it always tends to be. Like, so a bit of a hard one for FPL analytics managers this year. One that really sticks in my mind is when Saka got injured, and Odegaard was the call that I went with. I was being very ballsy about that, and review was backing me to the hill and didn't quite work out. Versus others who gambled on, ironically, Foden, I think it was, who did really, really well. A small microcosm, but an example of how maybe it didn't quite work for review this year in loads of different kind of facets. So I was quite good in terms of using it as the way we do it on this pod anyway, is use it as as kind of a check and balance, as a consulting sort of voice, rather than following it to the letter. And I think that we were both kind of talking about different routes, different paths, and kind of using that. And Johnny's just backs up my thoughts there too.
Yeah, so anyone listening on the pod, JC in the chat has also just mentioned worst rank for the median Elite 1000 manager is the worst so far. So it's interesting that review has had, for their standards, I would say, an off season. But as we always mention, one season is actually not a huge sample size when it comes to data crunching. It's still, it's not small, but it's not huge. So definitely. I think over a longer period of time, it would still kind of even out a little bit. The like Odegaard versus Foden thing was a very noisy outcome. But if you spread that across just one season, Foden had one patch of really good, in inverted commas, form. Odegaard hasn't been great all season, although he did finish off the season with 6 attack and returns in a row. So it's all about timing with these players, and form, or guessing form correctly, is the hardest thing to do in football and in FPL. And review kind of takes that element away from it. We're no longer guessing when form will come and go. It's kind of assuming a flat run average across the season, and that it will all level out over time. And if you make singular decisions, you're almost never going to get precisely what review gets, but over a season or over 10 seasons worth of playing, you might get a lot closer. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've summarized that correctly or not. Or
you're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, with in terms of number 5 for me, not dismissing reviewers quickly. Sorry. Yeah, I've done better on it this season, I think. Again, I've not just become mindless and just doing what review says, but I've taken it into account. I've taken analytics into account more closely. And yeah, looking forward to what next year brings. Obviously, Solio coming in as well is going to be amazing. And I think embracing analytics is a positive thing to do. It doesn't mean that you lose your own instincts, and it doesn't mean that you have to play mindlessly. It just almost brings together the information, especially those sort of outside factors that you might have otherwise forgotten about, all get baked into those numbers. So it gives you a more whole picture of what the FPL landscape might look like. It doesn't stop you from adding your own thoughts into that and your own interpretations. And I've done better this season, but again, I think I can do a lot better than I have done, and I want to learn more. I want to get used to how to play variants into my own into my own advantage, as Simon mentioned on the pod probably a few months ago now.
Yeah.
That you almost attack variants rather than defend against it, and that's something that I want to learn a little bit more about next year. So I could do better, but yeah, I haven't been dismissing it.
Yeah, need to get that guy back over the summer, I think. Great. Next one. I will not underestimate set piece takers. I think this one crystallizes very well in Brian Bumo. Sold him in game week 14. I think a lot of the community did. But the outcome of that, boy, oh boy, he didn't come back in with me until game week 29. In that period of 9-10 game weeks, went on to score 57 points, including a 19 points versus Saints, whereas I flailed around like a maniac after Saka got injured. Penalties obviously were a big part of that, as were other set piece deliveries. And I think that there were obviously, that's kind of coupled with the value of the player as well. But I think that there were certainly times, and we spoke about this when I was on Ross Rapser kindly invited me on his pod, that those set piece takers are so kind of appealing for a reason, aren't they? Because you've got that extra added bonus, haven't you? Every single time something goes off, like people having an awful game, a la Mo Salah, but still kind of come out of it with a couple of goals out of nowhere. Thinking about the Southampton game, we scored 2 penalties. I think it's Southampton game, wasn't it? Where he scored 2 pens.
Possibly.
Yeah, maybe. Let's go with that and hope.
He definitely got the 19 pointer or something around that, because I was watching it with my brother when the goals went in. I just can't remember how he scored them now.
Yeah. And Mark's just mentioned in the chat as well, Bruno Fernandes, who may no longer be in the league next year. Who knows? If I was him, I'd definitely take the money and run to Saudi. But by the by, I do think that underestimating set piece takers, I don't think that we've been too bad here. It hasn't been something really that's been top of mind for me. But looking back at my season and that Bumo sell, which I think that we mentioned as well on the troll pod a little while ago, that's certainly one that kind of stuck out to me like a sore thumb and fits quite nicely into this as a kind of a bit of a mistake. So he was such a good price, and the fixtures were pretty difficult, but I mean, he should never have been, and easy to say it through hindsight, but we knew what the player's value was, and he should never have been that close to the exit door, really, for me, I don't think, in retrospect.
Yeah, that's fair. And I again, this was one of my own, so I don't think I've done too badly on it, because I wrote them down and I've kept a sort of a note on them. But there have been times, I think, this season where there's been moments where I've picked a player without considering the alternative of the set piece taker. And maybe I've ever so slightly underestimated the value of those set pieces in that 50-50 call. Or maybe it's been more like in my mind anyway, a 60-40. I think Sar Eze is probably a fairly good example of that, where, okay, Eze hadn't been necessarily in great form and hadn't been fit for that long, but he did have a few set pieces in his locker, and Sar had none of that. And although Sar's open play threat was good, Eze at least had the opportunity to kind of level that out in other ways, even without necessarily playing that well. And then also, I think I'd almost add an element to this, that it's not just the set piece takers, but with corners and free kicks, it's also the set piece receivers, if that works, like a Milenkovic, for instance. And someone of Konza as well towards the end of the season, weirdly, which I really didn't expect. Dan Burn as well, I think got on the end of one. These players also, goals for defenders specifically, are so valuable. If you can find yourself a unit that is getting 90 minutes and is the target man for those set pieces, the one that we all know and love is Gabriel, but there are a fair few others out there that are almost being identified as, okay, every set piece goes for like the end of the set piece needs to get to this player. That's probably another element I'd now add to that for next season as something to consider. So again, not top marks, but not something that I think we've been too terrible at.
No, definitely not. The 3 top scoring defenders this year, who do you think they are?
I know Gvardiol was the only one to break 150. After that, Trent got very close. I think he's 147. And then I think it's Munoz. Is that right?
Milenkovic.
Okay.
Yeah, he got 5 goals, as did Correa and Gvardiol himself. We'll talk about that later on. Johnny in the chat just mentioned, obviously, but on terms of set piece takers, Palmer blanking versus Leicester as differential captain that week as well. In terms of overestimating and underestimating set piece takers, and I said, I probably blanked that one from my memory because I completely forgot about that in general. Next one that I completely messed up actually when we did this in summer. I will not overestimate the impact of one game week. So this was the idea that every week, obviously, the content churn kind of pushes you towards one optimal team, one player you must have every week. And I feel like I went from one extreme to the other. I feel like I spent a lot of the season kind of up until kind of game week 25, 26, trying to, do this annoyingly. Examples where there's lots of examples of times where I basically acted to get the so-called optimal side and managed to mess up doing so. And on the other hand, as kind of shown through my game week 34 not having the free hit active, I managed to not end up in that situation and got punished very, very heavily. And so a big D really this, and it's probably quite difficult in terms of what you consume to not be aware of what kind of the main picks are for one game week. And indeed we do that in our game week preview, but it's certainly kind of the point where I think, and it's just mentioned in the chat as well, the free transfers thing does kind of come in a bit more in terms of changing the philosophy and changing kind of the way in which you do things, where the judgment needs to be made about the value of rolling transfers. And I'll come on to that at the end of this in terms of kind of what probably needs to happen next year in terms of things that I will not do as much. But certainly something which, as an engaged FPL manager, Sam, this one's always quite a difficult one to to take the challenge of on with in terms of your thinking.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance to get right, because I think, a bit like you, I've almost swayed too far in the opposite direction this season at times, where I'm trying to optimize across a 5 to 10 game week period rather than focusing on what was a very good fixture for a specific player who's of a high quality. Last year, if I remember rightly, there was like a Wolves Sheffield United game. There was a few others, but like we'd not often, but every now and then just like attack one fixture and without thinking, oh, okay, how much am I going to want Hwang the next week after the Sheffield United game's out of the way? Not much, probably. Whereas this year, I think there were 1 or 2 opportunities, especially because the 3 promoted sides were so far adrift of Premier League quality. They were so targetable. And there was a big batch of teams that in previous seasons you probably feel fairly comfortable targeting, but weren't that targetable this year. There were only really those 3 teams that you could really go after the fixtures. And it meant that it meant that there might be more opportunity to go for short fixture swings, like if you've got 2 promoted clubs in the next 3 game weeks, or one incredibly good week with Southampton at home or something. There were probably times where I didn't optimize enough for 1 game week or chase those big highs, because I think there were less of them to be gotten at or consistently gotten at in other places. I think the fact that there was that drop off between 17th to 18th, 19th, 20th meant that there were only 3 really good fixtures in the league, and all the others were kind of like, yeah, okay, you're not going to sell a player for them, but they're not necessarily ideal. And I think if you counted up the amount of times I had players playing against those 3 promoted sides this year, probably not enough. And that's again just anecdotal. I haven't counted it up, but I would imagine that I'm nowhere near what some of the players at top ranks were able to do in terms of targeting those teams. So maybe that is a symptom of me not overestimating the impact of 1 game week enough. Maybe I need to get that balance right next year, or maybe it was just a bit of a weird year where there was that big drop off and there were less teams that you could target, and therefore you have to go after those specific fixtures.
Yeah, definitely. A nice segue into number 8. I will not disregard player and team quality and decision making. In terms of our setups against those kind of targetable teams, yeah, maybe there's a bit of a deficiency there. In terms of buying players from those teams, I don't think there's that much in terms of errors, except for 2. You've got 1, I've got 1. Your one is Mr. Adam Armstrong in game week 1.
Yes.
And my one is Leif Davis on my game week 6 wildcard.
Oh, yeah.
He and Milenkovic were the same price. And what was I doing?
Right.
I was just like, right, Leif Davis is definitely in. He's staying in no matter what. I'm going to instead move on Pinnock, I think it was, and Milenkovic in order to afford Mikalenko and Lewis. Doesn't that sound stupid right now in hindsight? Absolutely, yes, it does. And you know, I wish I'd taken a glance at this before I did that. So yeah, I think overall we've obviously not spent a lot of time messing around with poor quality players, but those are kind of 2 big examples. For you having a bit of a hampered start, and maybe for me having a player like Leif Davis taking on a player like Milenkovic. I haven't looked at what the verses would be the weeks I played Leif Davis versus the crowd playing a Nottingham Forest defender, but my lord, that has got to be pretty punitive, hasn't it?
Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that. So yeah, fair play. I don't think we'll be making this mistake next year. Not very high chances of me starting with any promoted sides players this year coming. Adam Armstrong, I mean, yeah, what was I thinking? Really, it was a terrible, terrible pick. I didn't see a world where he would lose his place after three game weeks. In fairness, I thought that was very unlikely. But maybe I underestimated, I definitely underestimated the chance of 3 losses in a row ending up in them needing to change the system and start messing with players that otherwise would have been safe in the Championship. So all of the benefits he had, good data, good returns in the Championship, penalties, that all goes if we're losing games and we're losing to 0, and none of that actually matters anymore. And the step up was so great, and it will be again, I think, for next season. I was talking to a few people at meets about this. I just think that step is massive now. Burnley and Sunderland in particular, I think, will be teams that will struggle. I might be wrong. Burnley, obviously great defense in the Championship, so they might be able to pull together a few clean sheets, but I can't see anything too tempting there. Leeds will be the team that probably is the most likely, I think, to have players of interest. But for me, to begin with, I just don't think there's any point in trying unless the game is structured in a way that the pricing makes it almost a necessity that you have to have a promoted side player in your team. I will be completely disregarding them until we've had a large enough sample size to be fairly confident that they might be good picks. And only at that time will I even consider taking a chance on them. But yeah, player quality and team quality is so important in this league. And if a team's not doing well, they can mix any player up. There are no players safe at that point. So yeah, I'm going to be I'm going to be much more careful on this one next year.
Yeah, 4.0 Luco 9, Sunderland side I legend, a game week 1 first sub. I mean, that's as far as I'm going to go. I think it's always going to be, as you say, defaulting to the rule that you kind of stick with the tried and tested, really. Okay, I will not default to the narrative. I think we kind of covered this a little bit already in terms of will not lose track of my own instinct, number 4. I do think the schism with X actually really helps here, because I don't really look at I just don't really look at X anymore, and I think that's kind of where you did see a lot of the slop posting, I suppose, in terms of what is going on generally in terms of the narrative. I kind of stuck in terms of FPL content to consuming a few kind of choice bits of content, and that was it. Didn't really read very much. With all due respect to the people who do work very hard, so maybe that helped a little bit, but there was certainly, as evidence through my chip strategy not paying off, I really didn't default to narrative very often. I don't think.
No, again, I think we kind of covered it, didn't we? But yeah, I don't think too badly on this one. I think, again, probably give myself a B. There were probably times where I might have had a busy week and I was like, you know what, I'll just do the simple thing. But quite often, in a weird way, this season, the simple thing has worked out fairly regularly. So maybe even if I had been guilty of number 9 this season, I haven't noticed it because it's actually paid off in the times when maybe I have defaulted to the narrative without thinking about it. So maybe in another season, if things had gone a different way, I'd be ruining missed opportunities because I'd just gone with the herd. But this year, I don't think it's been a problem, and even if it hasn't punished me. Specifically, this hasn't punished me. A lot of other things have. But yeah, I think number 9 is probably okay.
Yeah. Speaking of, so final one, things that have punished me, punished us, definitely your one, number 10. I will not forget to go on the attack. So this was a big one for you, wasn't it, pre-season, in terms of kind of obviously you said you're not, you know, a Nick style super cautious manager, but it's certainly something that you kind of felt like you had to kind of do a little bit more, and it kind of, for me, felt like towards the end you kind of made a few decisions that kind of a few weeks after you were thinking, oh no, I think maybe I was, if anything, being too aggressive there.
Yeah, 100%. I've mentioned a few of them already, but yeah, Mateta captaining him or even buying him after the injury was a risk. It didn't end up too poorly, but the minutes actually suggest that maybe I got a little bit lucky there, if anything. Saka triple captain. I was just taking big swings at this point because I was so far behind. I felt like I needed to go on the attack in a big way. And weirdly, if I hadn't have gone on the attack at all and I just almost played my regular way, I reckon I wouldn't be that far off 100k right now. It's the weeks where I did go on the attack, the Asensio missed penalties, the Saka triple captain, a couple of the hits along that period of time as well. I think I went Palmer captain and he blanked against Southampton too. When again, I could have probably just gone with the higher owned Salah and it would have been okay. Yeah, there were just a few times where I went on the attack maybe either too early or possibly too aggressively, thinking that I had more ground to make up than I did. And I should have just kept the faith a little bit longer. But I don't want to completely disregard this rule next year. I still think it's important to do. But I think a lot of it is on timing, and I left myself open to too much variance going the opposite way. And look, I knew that going in. I knew the risks that I was taking. I would do it again, probably in a slightly different way. I would take risks knowing how far back I was, but I took risks on things like expected minutes when long term that was always going to be an issue, and maybe I need to go on attack in a more conservative way, if that makes sense. Yeah, so still aggressive, but just on low ownership players rather than on people that I can't even be confident that minutes are going to be there. JC has said in the chat that triple captain Saka was unfortunate because he should have started the second game if it wasn't for your favorite player, Leif Davis, raking him down the ankle. But you know what? That is true. But but also he'd just come back from an injury, and any sort of minor knock in the first game was always going to put him at major doubt in the second game because they weren't going to want to take a risk. So I agree with you. It was unlucky, but I put myself in a position where I could get unlucky more often than not because the risk was greater on a player like Saka, whose minutes were going to be maybe a little bit managed and he was going to be wrapped in cotton wool. So yeah, there's maybe a bit of both there, but I don't want to completely forget this rule because I think it is important to do at times.
Yeah, for sure. I think it makes sense for you to just kind of maybe think about being more targeted when you're aggressive, I guess, maybe. But I think a lot of it is just down to kind of where you were and the kind of the general contextual factors towards the end of the year. Throughout this year, looking at my FPL review, if anything, I was too attacking, which kind of does suit me a little bit in terms of how I kind of play. FPL review has me on the top percentile for differential play. It didn't work out this year, and the reason why is because it was a highly template year, really. In terms of kind of just to round this whole thing off, my observation of the state of the game this season, to give a quick comment on that, was that it was a year that favoured the template. It was reminiscent of the season where Salah, Kane, Son and Bruno were the top 4 scorers in 2020, 2021. And there was zero liquidity, basically. There's nothing you could really do if you didn't own those players. There was no real sort of way out. If you started well, you were probably kind of well set, and challenging was a little bit more difficult. Basically, the premiums this year, not called Mo Salah, were pricey. They were patchy. Saka, Haaland, Palmer all had their moments but burnt out, as did Isaac. There's no real kind of consistency in terms of being sustained to force into decisions and stop the template. It got really stodgy by kind of the mid-20s, and after that there was in some ways very little you could do. And I think there obviously will be examples where we went on and captain Bowen for the final kind of period that someone said in the chat. Fair enough, but basically the upshot of all these premiums stuttering meant there was more money to go around, and also the template was stronger than ever, effectively, because there was no barrier to entry in terms of owning those sort of key players. There are no big choices needed to be made between premiums. There was no need to kind of cut costs and go for the beta option, and the premiums misfiring anyway. So it was really easy for people to get to a conservative team, basically just hold rank. Plus, as you mentioned earlier, having those 3 players in the relegation zone from the off effectively meant that those are the only teams you could target, and there was maybe less predictability as a consequence in terms of what constitutes a good fixture. We spoke a lot of time this season about death by 1,000 cuts being why our game really didn't work. You had kind of one big threat, be it normally for us it was like Morgan Rogers or something like that, but there were kind of loads of different players who were kind of 20-30% owned, and that kind of inflicted the damage in terms of creating a red arrow when it looked like you're going to get great gains every week. That marginal pain a fair bit was kind of something which I think I'm going to remember the season for. And I think that was just due to how solid the template was because of the contextual factors of how the season basically shook out. So yeah, maybe as kind of the overall thing, maybe I should have been more inclined in terms of number 10, in terms of the attack, to cover my exposure rather than increase my potential losses through catching a multitude of falling knives, to extend the trading analogy. Plus, there were those big EO gambles. Didn't go my way. So yeah, a season to learn a lot from, but also seasons to forget in many ways. So yeah, I hope that was vaguely useful, and it wasn't just us kind of lamenting our own failures. I'm sure there was something that each of you can take from our discussion there. On to the bold claims this year before we go on to the awards of the season to round off this year. The bold claims are all over. I have one prevailed for the second year in a row. Yeah, your man Semenyo has done the damage.
He did, yeah. Thankfully for me as well, he stayed under 10% ownership, so it actually came in for both of us and got me a nice little rank jump there. So that was nice. My bold claim didn't end up quite so nice. I thought, why not Hail Mary on Southampton, since it's the last time I'll be seeing us in the Premier League. To beat Arsenal did not happen. At least we got a goal though. It was nice seeing Ross Stewart celebrate for the first time this year. But yeah, looking forward to our new leader Will Still being in charge, and yeah, fingers crossed we can come bouncing straight back up, or I'd actually kind of like a couple of years in the championship to get down there more often and maybe rebuild. I think we need it. But yeah, I did not get the point. I knew it was very unlikely, this one. But hey, what's bold claims for if it's not for a little bit of fun at the end?
Yeah, so you could have won the whole thing if that had come off, but actually no, I think I'd have given you 3, so I would have drawn. But anyway, I got it was 6-3 to me in the end. The player less than 10% owned, the top scorer in game week 38, who was Semenyo. So yeah, 6-3 to me, and a combined hit rate 24% this year, which is pretty good going. What, 1 every 4 weeks we got a bold claim off. It did feel like for a long time we were kind of stuck at 3-3. Just towards the end, it kind of worked. And just to take you all back to game week 1, pre-game week 1, we had some season on bold claims, and it has been an utter disaster. This one, it's just not worked out at all, which shows the fallacy of these sorts of things sometimes. Because this game, football, rather than this FPL, twists and turns in such a way, and that it's almost impossible. If you think about Liverpool, for example, only Barry Glenn of anyone that I know predicted them to win the title. Look at the BBC kind of correspondence. I think only one of them, who's Stephen Warnock, who gets Liverpool anyway, had them finishing second. So yeah, pretty wild in terms of a lot of the outcomes this year. But yeah, our FPL season on bold claims, or FPL/football season on bold claims, have resulted in me with another victory, Sam. Yes, let me have this. I'm literally clutching at straws. Yeah, in a majestic 1-0 victory. What did you predict? And yeah, obviously it didn't work out.
No, it didn't work out. I think I got a bit unlucky with injuries for Trent. I went 200-point club for Trent in what ended up being his final season at the club. Got to 147. He did get injured for a little bit, and obviously came out the side towards the end quite often. So I don't think I would have been a million miles off if he had been fit. But no, the injuries are a part of it. So nowhere near for him in the end. Number 2 was top scoring keeper being Onana. Now, he wasn't a million miles off, but he certainly wasn't top point scoring keeper, and he didn't cover himself in glory. Did he lose his place, or was he just rotated for the last game of the season? I feel like he lost his place.
At this point.
Yeah, not great. Although my last season's bold claim would have come in on Edison getting dropped for Ortega, so I'll take a point for last season's. And number 3 is Minte, who I was quite bullish on at the start of the season. I'm still relatively bullish on him as a player. I think there's a really good talent there to get 20 attacking returns. Didn't quite happen. I think he got, was it something like 12, 13, 14, something like that. So yeah, certainly not 20. But maybe next year, if he gets some more consistent minutes, it could be his year. But no points for me. 3 bold claims, and they remain bold.
Yeah, 6 goals and 5 assists and 20 starts, Minte. So, you know,
Okay.
averaged upwards. You could have got there. Yeah, no, fair enough. My 3 were 1. I think my first one was hampered by injury. Saka's outscored Salah as he cruises to his third 200 club in a row. Didn't happen, but Saka did miss a lot of the season for injury, which is something you can't legislate for. Number 2, the OC 200. 8 players to get the 200 club this season, the highest in 2019-20. 5 players got 200 club this year. Salah, Palmer, Bumo, Isaac, and Wood on the final day got to the 200 exactly, but didn't quite get to the 8. Bowen, 193. Was 6th. He was very close. I think he's been in it before. And 3rd, the one that clinched it for me, was Voldemort, the bold manager to win the sack race this year. Eric Ten Hag's departure from Manchester United in October clinched it for me. He's now the Leverkusen manager, replacing Xabi Alonso. Right. Okay. Do that again next year, I guess, and see how we go. On to this season's awards to end up everything else. A few things to go through here, just to kind of give our kind of final thoughts on the season. Goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, flop of the year, surprise of the year, team of the year, and player of the year. In terms of goalkeepers, Sam, I mean, Pickford won it out. Are you going to give it to him, though?
Pickford's up there for me. It seems like the obvious one because he won. I don't have tons of amazing memories with him. He was a bit frustrating at some of the points where I owned him personally, but I know that a lot of managers did have a good time with him, especially after Moyes came in. So I can't do it just based on my personal experiences with him. I also wanted to give an honorary mention to Sarr as well. I know he'll probably be in there for you with the pen save in the free hit week was pretty massive. And Sells, another one that I think I don't have a lot of Nottingham Forest players in these awards personally, so it's a nice way of like introducing that conversation. Obviously tailed off at the end pretty badly, but for a long time, for a keeper that at the start of the season, I think a lot of us questioned whether or not he'd even be the keeper for the season. I remember, was it Miguel that came in at the start of the year that like a huge 6'8" keeper?
Unit,
yeah. And we were all worried, like, oh, who's going to start in goal? Well, Sells made it his own and had a really good first half of the season, probably 3/4 of the season. So, yeah, I think I'll probably give it to Pickford, but honorary mention to Sells and Sarr there.
I think I was going to give it to Sells, actually.
Nice.
Frustratingly for us, because we didn't own him at any point. But I feel like he was just simply revelatory, really, in terms of what he produced for FPL managers and so on and so forth. I think that was kind of quite big. I think Dean Henderson for kind of holistic contribution, perhaps, in terms of the FA Cup victory. I think I did something this year that I haven't done ever before, Sam, in terms of owning a player for the entire season. That player was David Raya. I've never ever had a player the whole campaign through. He even stayed on during the free hit. But oh yeah, I mean, it's goalkeeper, whatever. But yeah, very close in Pickford and Sells. I mean, Pickford on the final day got 11 points versus Newcastle to get him over the line above Sells. I think that Sells got the most clean sheets. If is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, fair. The top goalkeeper this year, actually, for save percentage was Robert Sanchez, incredibly.
What?
Yeah, 76% save percentage. David Raya was third of players who had started more than, I think Fabianski's actually was second with 14 starts out of nowhere. It was Sanchez, Raya, Kepa, and Sells in fourth for save percentage for this year. And in terms of saves made, it is Mark Flecken still, 203, over 200 saves for Mark Flecken. But yeah, I'm probably going to go. I'm going to give it to Sells, I think, this year, in terms of the impact he has on FPL, because that is what we're here to talk about. Defenders, though, in terms of what we're here to talk about, I think it goes to Guardiola by default. I mean, it's definitely not been a halcyon year for defenders in general. 153 points, the highest scoring one, versus White, I think, scored 182 points or something last year. It's quite the drop off. I think the new bonus system is a real thorn in their sides. Losing bonus for any concession to such a huge extent is a proper penalisation for defenders. And I think the upshot of that is, unless they make changes, I don't know if Mr. Southerns is going to go in and mess stuff up. But learning for next year is that we go back to proper old school defense, don't we? The premium defenders, maybe we have one from a top team with a solid defensive record who has a good opening set of fixtures, but other than that, we just take the money out of defense, because really this year it's really not been anything to shout about from the defenders. If Guardiola's getting it by default, admittedly he did score 5 goals. If he was playing on the left, he was still kind of a good attacking proposition, but hey, it really hasn't been a banner year for them, has it, at all?
No, it's been a really low year for defenders, and I'd be surprised if it was quite as bad as this. I think it's not just the bonus points, things like that. It's also just the lack of clean sheets across the board. There's very low season. JC in the chat mentioning the top keepers for clean sheets. 13 was the most clean sheets two teams kept it. Arsenal with Raya and Sells for Nottingham Forest, and then Pickford with 12. So it is a really low year for clean sheets. You'd expect that to balance out a little bit. City tightened up towards the end of this season and looked like a much more stubborn defence to break down. So Gvardiol could still be a very good pick next year. In terms of awards, though, Gvardiol's not where I'm going. I'm actually going to go with Munoz, personally. Although he got off to a little bit of a shaky start, and there was a little bit of adjustment. Nikolai correctly mentioned Liverpool 14 clean sheets, but of course Alisson injured, by the way. Sorry, I need to correct myself there. Munoz, despite the shaky start, Palace obviously needing to adjust to life without Elise in there as well. He ended up being an absolutely fantastic option across the season. He was a lot of fun to own, as Mark's just said in the chat. Although objectively not the best defender in the game, I think a lot of the positive memories that I've got of defenders this year come from Munoz, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. A couple of shout outs I wanted to mention quickly: Hall, who hasn't been an option for quite a while since the injury, but he was absolutely brilliant in that sort of middle patch of the season, and Nuri as well, quietly just being a very solid option for the majority of the year too. Obviously got I think the most attacking returns out of any defender, or if not very, very close to. If Wolves kept a few more clean sheets, then he'd be right up there. And he's getting whispers of a move, so maybe he'll be an option at City next year.
Who knows? Yeah, Munoz was the only defender, the top defender in terms of expected goal involvement. Did make the top 50 actually, above the likes of Justin Kluivert, João Pedro, Elanga, Foden, Jota, Odegaard. Like you wouldn't have pegged that at the start of the year. But yeah, over 10 expected goal involvements. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in the 5.5 next year, as many have mentioned, which is a shame. If he's 5, if they do neglect to update, I'm sure they won't. But he'll be in everyone's team. So yeah, 5.5, I think, for Munoz next year. I think that's a really good shout, actually. I do think it goes to Guardiola by default, but I'm more than happy with that call as well. Midfielder, Salah, obviously, but we've got a player of the year to do as well.
Yeah.
You're going to Salah. So if it's going to be someone else, I think it's going to be Bumo here. One shy of 30 goal involvements, including FPL assists, has got to be said. An absolute tour de force. I suspect he might be leaving Brentford. It's a shame that he can't. There's no way he'd fit in Arsenal or Saka playing where he plays, and will probably find himself in the upper pricing tiers next year. But wow, what an asset he was this season. Yeah, I say for gritted teeth, I've not owned him for a fair amount of the season when he did very well. But wow, what an asset he was. And if he continues the trajectory and goes somewhere that suits him, more importantly, don't go to Man United. Don't get your career Rude Brian. Just don't do it. Go to Newcastle. Just anywhere. Leave the country. Just don't go to United. We could have a real FPL monster on our hands for years to come. One thing I would say is that he's actually the overperformer, the highest overperformer for XG this year, plus 7.5 more than he should have got. But hey, Bumo gonna Bumo effectively. So I think it's got to probably be him, even though there are loads of other options out there, and obviously Salah probably takes one by default. But we're not going to do that thing where Haaland gets the Player of the Year and the Young Player of the Year here, are we?
No, I've in my notes written almost exactly what you've just described. Salah by default, but that's boring, and we've got a Player of the Year to deal with, which I'm sure you can guess where that's going. And then Mbeumo, yeah, after that, a mad season for a Brentford player to have. Obviously, penalties help that, but to get 90 minutes pretty much every week this year, he's been ridiculously consistent, and even through rougher patches of fixtures, he's still returned pretty reasonably as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how they price him next year. He will be off penalties if he goes anywhere else, you'd think. Newcastle, he wouldn't get penalties. Man United, he wouldn't get penalties. If he was to go to Arsenal, he wouldn't get penalties. No, he's not getting penalties wherever he goes. So I just wonder if he's going to be an option if they price him at 9+ next year. I think they're going to have to be very canny to keep him competitive, because it was an overperformance, and if you take the penalties off of that, it could be really interesting. So yeah, that's not what this award ceremony is all about, though. He's done incredibly well, and no Tony being in the side, he's really made that step up. So yeah, fair play, Mbeumo. Congratulations, you're midfielder of the year for us.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if the season had continued onwards, I'm pretty sure that Jared Bowen was the top scorer over the last 10 game weeks with 73 points. He'd have been kind of more in the discussion, wouldn't he? Let's face it. But yeah, I mean, I think it kind of has to go there by basically because he's the proxy for not going Salah for this one. Few kind of honourable mentions. Obviously, I think we'll kind of get onto this actually in the surprises, but I think you've got to be looking at Morgan Rogers here as an outside shot. Luis Diaz, quietly, I was shocked when I looked at the numbers earlier on. 183 points this year, Sam Luis Diaz. I would not have put him there if I was asked how many points did he score this year. And then the likes of Clive, Sade towards the end of the season, Sarr, Matoma, even Brennan Johnson. They all had their moments in the sun, didn't they? But in terms of sustained brilliance, it has been those two. Palmer, I think, does probably just do himself out of the mention just due to second half of the season. Effectively, I mean, yeah, he got over 200, but 6 attacking returns after game week 19 compared to 19 in the first half is just pretty insane as a drop off. And kind of linking back to my point earlier on, his absence from the second half of the season, coupled with Salah's enduring brilliance, again made the season quite a template one. So, yeah, I think that he's, even though he did go over 200 points, and I mean, it would be the Boomo year if Salah didn't exist, I think, and he was second this year, and I think that that's kind of something that shouldn't ever be taken away from old Brian. 25 years old, actually, Brian.
Yeah.
Expects to be older given how he looks. Anyway, forwards, Isaac won it, but definitely blew hot and cold. I think there's only one winner here, isn't there, really?
Interesting. I wonder where you're going to go with this one. Because I'm not saying Chris Wood. I'm going with Wissa. Because I think for his price, alongside the data he put up, and the fact that without penalties, he matched, or well, up until the final game of the season, he matched all of the top scorers in the league in a team that's mid-table historically. For me, it's got to be Wissa. He absolutely incredible. To underlying XG per 90 of over 0.58, I think it was, without penalties, in again a team that you would not be expecting to get anywhere near that kind of return. Absolutely incredible. That price point, what a player. Like, genuinely, like, for me, above Chris Wood, because Chris Wood overperformed for ages, had penalties and tailed off. Wissa just brilliant all season long. That's my guy.
Bastard stole my line. Yeah,
really?
I was gonna go for Visser as well.
No, I really thought you were gonna go with Wood.
No. I think that if I had been a long-term Chris Wood owner, I'd be like, yeah, it's obviously Chris Wood. But come on, we're a data-focused, but we're a data-led podcast, and yeah, it's got to be Visser really. Second to Haaland actually for non-pen XG this year. Haaland just shaded it at the very end, 0.5. But yeah, top 5.
That's even close though. Like,
I know, it's wild, isn't it? Top 5 for non-pen XGI this year, as you said, kind of, in basically most underlying metrics. Hey, here we go. He's in the top 10 the whole time. Like Swally Watkins didn't quite kind of do it this year, didn't quite cut it. Isaac was pretty kind of quietly consistent throughout this year. And I think that maybe,
but price comes into it as well.
Yeah, and I think with Isaac as well, maybe he's a victim of kind of the inflated expectations we had at the start of the year for him. Admittedly, he did kind of get poked in the eye and all this sort of thing. But I think at the start of the year, when we saw the 8.5 million price, we were expecting like wonders this year, and didn't quite happen for him. Whereas Visser has been a real revelation, hasn't he, towards the end of the year? I think we always knew that he had kind of quite good online data. He finished 4th. In terms of kind of the last 10 game weeks, in terms of underlying points scored. Bowen, Bumo, Eze were ahead of him. But yeah, the numbers he was putting up towards the end of the year were out of this world, really, and in lots of, in most games. And I think that, I think probably one of them is going to go over the course of the summer. I'd like to see what would happen if they both kind of stayed on. I think maybe kind of them not getting Europe may have been a bit of a downfall in that regard. But yeah, if Visser does become the main man there, and Brentford being Brentford, they're going to be able to replace, or maybe they've already replaced Bumo. You don't know. Maybe there's some sort of 20-year-old South American sat in their team, Thiago, hanging around. But yeah, it was going to be Visser for me as well. I was hoping that you'd say Wood, so I'd be able to say what you just said effectively. So yeah, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad that we've ended up in the same place. It's got to be Visser for me. Real revelation. I'll be really interested to see what his price is next year. Due to him scoring 186 points, I think it's probably going to be again maybe a bit high. But starting from 6, maybe he'll end up at kind of 8-ish. Which would be a really interesting thing to see. Miss T in the chat has just mentioned Cunha, Welbeck being enjoyable to watch. First year he's ever got double digits. That guy Welbs. Cunha at times obviously kind of blew hot and cold. Woods was the top forward overperformer, 6. No, the second highest actually, a top overperformer of 6, and Cunha was second in terms of overperforming, which is just sort of player Man United by the overperformer. Hey, there we go. Right, so with a surprise agreement there, on to flop of the year. quite a few potential nominees for this one, Sam.
Yeah.
I must confess, I've actually struggled to come to one. There's newly promoted teams, Man City without Rodri, the Arsenal attack.
Yeah.
No one granted. The Trossard was the highest scoring Arsenal player with 152 points. Relative absence from the scene may have contributed again to this being quite a template season. Palmer in the second half, Haaland, but I mean, obviously he has been injured. But Haaland's drought from a big bang at the start. There are loads of options here. Interested to see which one you land on. I think I'm likely to be led by you on this one because I literally could not decide. I did kind of think the newly promoted teams was probably the one to go with, but I mean that does feel a bit sort of straightforward, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't. Well, Southampton are the flop, but I can't say that myself. In terms of a player, because that's where, like, that's what I thought this question was around. For me, it's Foden. And Mark's just said the same in the chat as well. Whilst Palmer has been annoying in the back end of the season, he's still gotten, is it 25 attacking returns? So I don't think flop would quite be the word for him. Like, maybe if it was a half season awards, flop would be fair. But Foden has, barring like a 5-game week period in the middle, just been like just a non-option almost all season. And that's really surprising considering the player quality. There is an absolutely world-class player in there. I'm sure of it. It just hasn't panned out for him this year. I know he's had injuries to deal with. I know there's been mitigating circumstances there. But as an FPL player, just not being an option, considering how well he performed last year, it really felt like a coming-of-age season last year. And they kick on even further. And hopefully this is just a blip. I think he will get back, and I think he will probably be that KDB replacement through the centre next year, or playing maybe off the left as an inverted where Grealish is coming out possibly. But this season's just been terrible. And yeah, for me, the fact he's never been a factor, that means he's flop of the season for me.
Yeah, that's a shout. I'm inclined to go with that. The only other kind of thing that I had was the defence in FPL in general.
Yeah.
Aided and abetted by the changes to the bonus system, but it has been a very, very low scoring year for defenders in general. And if things don't change, I think that, the likes of Nola Aina, for example, that sort of player, getting someone like that in early and just riding the wave. And even though he only scored 128 points, there were several weeks, especially early doors, where he on his own caused you to get a red arrow because the kind of the ownership kind of coalesced around this guy so much at some point at certain points. But yeah, maybe that's one. But yeah, no, I can definitely get behind Foden. Surprise of the season, anti-penultimate one. Chris Woods is probably the one that most people are going to point to. I mean, he's not exactly a surprise package, is he? But him scoring 20 goals this year probably is. He was always the kind of player, Burnley, that you could kind of count on to get into double digits. Lots of memorable hat tricks along the way. But this year, kind of his kind of rampant performance is absolutely wild. And I think that he definitely, he's not going to have a season like this again. I may be proven wrong, but I don't think he will. I think he'll have a lot of ownership at the start of next year as well. When we kind of get everybody who's forgotten about FPL coming back again and going, oh yeah, Chris Will was quite good last year. I'll get him in. But I think it's got to be Morgan Rogers, hasn't it? At 5 million. Obviously, he didn't quite kind of scale the heights of Cole Palmer, but nonetheless, he's a player that we actually picked out on game week 1, pre-game week 1, when the prices opened. In fact, as being a player who was well worth keeping an eye on, and probably one of those players in retrospect we should just left in situ all year, really. In terms of him kind of coming through to be kind of undroppable for Emery, effectively 37 starts this year kind of says it all, really, from kind of nowhere. Towards the end of last year, he kind of started to kind of get in the team, but what he's done this year is incredible. And I saw a joke the other day that City were offering Villa 100 million plus Rodgers to get Grealish, and now they're going back on it and offering Grealish plus 100 million to buy Rodgers back. I mean, it's just absolutely insane, isn't it? So I don't know. I think it's probably going to be Rodgers for me. I'm not sure whether that's kind of just tainted by the fact that Chris Wood has hurt me so much this year. But I feel like for this sort of pick, it's got to be like a Palmer-esque sort of one that's come out of left field that has kind of just been quite a consistent player throughout the course of the season. But Wood has done that as well. Interested to see what you think on that one.
Yeah, both good shouts, really good shouts, and I wouldn't have any problems with picking either of them as the overall winner here. A couple of others that I picked out, which I would say are more surprising in the sense that they became FPL options at all, rather than I think with Wood and Rogers, I'm surprised at how well they did. But they were factors going into game week 1. Like I still thought they could be options. And obviously we talked about them at length at the start of the year. So I didn't have them down necessarily as like out and out surprises as players, more like surprises as to how much they became factors. For me, the two surprises I've got jotted down are Clivert and Murphy. And the reason that I've got those two is because at no point at the start of the year was I even considering them. I thought Murphy's minutes were never going to be anywhere near good enough and would probably lose his place eventually. And they would probably find a way to incorporate both Gordon and Barnes on either side, and Murphy would drop out, being more of a legacy Newcastle player. And I didn't think he could make that step up to becoming the crucial element to the Newcastle side he has done. So that massively surprised me. And then, of course, had the FPL element of it in the back end of the season where he was phenomenal for a lot of us. Clivert as well was not on my radar at the start of the season either. It took me quite a while to warm up to the idea of him being a good FPL option. The data started looking pretty good fairly early on, obviously put on penalties as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but previous to this season, he was nowhere near anyone's thinking ever, I don't think. No. So despite both of them being Premier League players for a little while now, neither of them ever really entered my thoughts. Whereas with Rodgers and Woods, there seemed like a realistic world where I could have ended up with either of them in game week 1. And therefore that for me means they weren't massive surprises.
Yep. Okay. I'll take those. I think they're all kind of variations on the same similar sort of theme of players who have come out of left field in some way. But I see what you mean about them being kind of game week 1. We could have maybe seen it coming, but I think that Rodgers has kind of exceeded the expectation. You know,
for sure.
I think him kind of becoming the bionic man who plays every single game was certainly something we couldn't have foreseen. So yeah, no, I'll take any of those. I'm now really kind of thinking Rodgers kind of gets it.
Yeah.
But I can see why people might be thinking, yeah, this is obviously Chris Woods. And maybe people are also saying forwards, obviously Chris Woods. So yeah, fine. I'll take it whatever you want to do. But I'll probably go for Rodgers in that one. Penultimate one, team of the season. I think it has got to be Forest here, hasn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Although not for me, because they have, like, for 26 weeks they were great, and the second I started bringing them in, they were absolutely terrible, and ruined my season.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I mean, yes, they are probably team of the season for most people, as well as probably surprise package of the season for a team. I've noted down two other teams that most people probably won't agree with, but are personal to me. Newcastle, throughout the season, almost consistently have had at least one player, if not two, in all of our thinking, whether that be Isak, whether that be Livramento, Lewis Hall, Shah at times, Murphy, Gordon. There's been loads of options at Newcastle littered throughout the season where whenever we needed them most, they've come good. So Newcastle, for me, I think deserve a quiet mention here, an honorary mention. Same goes to Brentford, having 3 players score 10 plus goals, all at really reasonable prices. 2 of those players being consistently good FPL options in Mbeumo and Wissa. I think they deserve a mention here. I've basically gone on joy distributed to me and my team. And so those 2 get in, but I think Nottingham Forest, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, qualitatively, I think you're probably right. I think the only 2 things mentioned from a data point of view, Chelsea was second for XG this year, ahead of Man City and Newcastle, which
That's crazy.
is yeah. And the 3rd best defense this year was Fulham. 5th best was Everton, actually. So yeah, a couple of kind of shouts there in terms of the data. One that kind of you have to pick your poison based on the events that you've had, but I can get behind any of them. I just think that kind of from where Forest ended up last year, kind of barely surviving to what they became this year, in terms of the price of the players, and they filled a big gap, the Arsenal gap, effectively in loads of different ways, in terms of being that sort of cheap sort of perennially playable stock of players. I mean, admittedly not in the midfield that much, but certainly if you kind of had Aina and had Wood from the game week 6 wildcard, or had indeed started the season with them for whatever reason, like, you were laughing. And I think that's kind of the holy grail, really, in terms of what we're looking for as FPL managers. So I think it's got to be them from an FPL perspective, but there's loads of different good shouts in there. Player of the season, Salah. Done. Right, over.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, to be fair, because we haven't talked about him at all, and he probably deserves a number of these awards. 344 points is absolutely nuts. Like, the amount of returns this guy got, especially considering last few game weeks, he massively teetered off and just dropped off and didn't do anything.
Returns from game week 30.
Unbelievable. Like, that first 30 game weeks, I'd never seen anything like it. I think he had 14 double-digit hauls in that time. Just, again, crazy returns. I doubt we'll ever see that broken, because, I mean, unless Salah can go and do one better next year, but every year he's a year older, it gets more difficult. Man City will come storming back, I'm sure. Arsenal will be a factor. I mean, it's just a mad set of returns. So fair play, player of the season, no question.
What price next year? I mean,
14.5.
We're looking at Van Persie levels, aren't we, of pricing here?
Yeah, higher than Haaland.
Yeah, they've got to do it. They've got to force it. Honestly, there's no way, shape, or form that would see them at the end of the season at 1.1 higher than the 12.5 initial pricing. What was Haaland 14?
I think was he 15? I think he was 15.
He was 15. He was 15, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, and Salah 13.5, maybe, or no,
12.5.
12.5. Wow.
Yeah,
because he went up 1.3, didn't he, in the end?
Yeah, I mean, he was 12.5 last. He was a 13 a couple of years ago, then 12.5 last year, and he kind of stayed there despite getting another 200 club. And hey, here we are. I think Haaland will get a slight downgrade, maybe looking kind of 12, 13. Salah will go up to 15, and hopefully that'll make a bit of a question for us to kind of deal with. But yeah, this year the value and the outputs is just wild, and there's no way around that. It was the most Salah season yet again, as we always seem to say on this podcast.
Yeah, we do.
Right. Well, there we go. Nice little kind of button put on the season there. Any summer plans, Sam? Anything you're looking to do while you're off to recuperate?
Yeah. I'm already kind of mapping out content for when the season comes back. I am excited for it, but we've got a good month, and probably a month and a half now before anything really comes back of note. That we'll probably start getting price rises early-ish July. Price reveals early-ish July. So until then, I'll probably be in sunbathing mode. But yeah, nothing too crazy. Just cracking on with work, going on a little holiday, and coming back recharged. What about you, Tom?
So 80 days until next season. It doesn't feel very long, does it?
No.
So yeah, we've got a little while off now. Me and a couple of the guys have been kicking around the site from the FPL community that I've kind of made friends with over the years. Have been kicking around doing a gaming podcast. So I think we might give that a go over the summer, just to kind of give me an excuse to have beer on a Tuesday night, basically, going forward. So it'll be called Over Encumbered. If anyone knows what that means, then we will be kind of trying to do something at some point. If you reprobates in the FPL community. But other than that, WGTA will always come first. So as soon as this summer, as we get prices, as soon as we start to think about stuff, that will go in the bin immediately, and off I'll go with WGTA. And I'm looking forward to it. I think we should try to get a few summer specials in, try to get Ross FPL Raptor into a behavioral science one, and definitely try to get Simon back for an analytics one, and try to do a couple of other bits and pieces. But yeah, I think this will basically be it for a little while. I think we've earned the break. I think I need to recuperate. You need to map out all your content as next year you take over the world, leave Oscar, Harry and co in your dust, as you told them on Meets. Next year, lad, you are going to be in my dust, in my rearview mirror.
I don't think I did say that, did I?
I'm sure you did. That was literally the conversation I walked in on. It's been a fun year podding. challenging. It's not been the funnest year in FPL. But yeah, it's been very good, Sam. So thank you very much for persisting with me throughout this year. Yeah, it's been great.
And are you? Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. I can't wait to do season 3, and hopefully next year will be our most successful yet. But it's a pleasure as always, Tommy. Even if the season's not going well, it's great to tune in and sort of get involved on a Tuesday night with you and have a bit of a laugh about it if everything seems a bit crap after a poor game week. So yeah, couldn't talk to a better person about it, and I really can't wait to get going again next year. In the meantime, a huge thank you to all of you who have tuned in this season. It's been massively appreciated. We can't wait to get going. Although that being said, a break is welcome, and I hope you guys all out there enjoy the break as well. Come back recharged, and we'll go for a top 10k finish, all of us, all at once in 25-26. We were Who Got the Assist. On X, you can find us at WGTA_FPL. I myself am FPL Pricey. Instagram threads, it's WGTA.FPL. Again, FPL Pricey on there. And Blue Sky is just WGTA. And again, FPL Pricey there. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could please do one or all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever. And of course, leaving a like, hitting subscribe on YouTube, and then you won't miss out on the first piece of content that we post very soon-ish, I would say. 3 weeks until the fixtures. Won't be that long. And yeah, enjoy the break, guys, and we'll see you next season.
Yes, thanks, Sam. We hope you enjoyed the pod, and we hope we assisted you this season. Thanks so much again for spending your time with us. We're back next year. I hope you can join us then too.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?